Did I ever tell you, Sean, how I almost set ablaze a $500,000 worth of servers?
No.
In DevOps. You've already heard Sean's story. You've heard my story. And if you haven't, there's links down in the description. And if you haven't, there's links down in the description for you to check out. But today we're going to be focusing on you. We're going to focus on how you can get started with DevOps. And we're going to give you our top 10 tips to help you get that leapfrog, help you build that catalyst, and just get into it. Because at the end of the day, DevOps can be a little daunting, can be a little bit overwhelming, but there's no better way to start than to just start. And so we're going to give you our best tips.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. That's a great intro. So one of the things that we kept forgetting to mention is both Alex and I are authors, and the premise of my book, the DevOps Overture, which is overture is what the orchestra does to warm up before a performance, is how do you get into DevOps? What are the entry paths if you're already in IT and you want to become more DevOps focused? And if you're concerned about being replaced by DevOps, or maybe a more modern concern is being replaced by AI.
I think everybody's afraid of that.
Yeah. I'll put the link up here of where you can get to my books, the DevOps, my book, the DevOps Overture. I'm going to have a lot of editing here, but and then Alex, you co-authored a book as well.
I did. So I co-authored a book. It's really more of a cookbook than anything else, and the premise behind the book was that in order to get started with DevOps, you can read a lot of books about it, right? You can read a lot of blog posts, you can read a lot of documentation, but you ultimately want to build something. You want to roll up your sleeves and actually create something. And so this cookbook that I co-authored with 3 other folks, it's practical. It's based on the Atlassian ecosystem. So all of the resources, the majority, if not all of them, are basically free. And it's very easy to integrate and to get everything talking to each other. And it's thorough. And every chapter has like an actual project that you can do or things that you're going to be clicking in a UI. And then there's also a bonus chapter at the end where we actually walk you through a full example end to end. And so it's very practical and very hands-on, which is when you're getting started with DevOps, one of those critical things that you want in order to get started, right? To have a platform of stability to then go down rabbit holes, because you could probably make a profession out of being a DevOps engineer.
Are you baiting me?
I am a little bit. I tried. Did it work?
Well, I at least recognized it. I'm not sure if I took the bait, but
Sean has strong words about whether DevOps engineers is a real thing or not.
Yeah, I definitely don't think you should have a DevOps team. Certain aspects of DevOps, you can, I will reluctantly be okay with certain aspects of DevOps being called the DevOps engineer. But DevOps is so wide, there's not one person that's going to know all the aspects or be an expert in all the aspects of DevOps. So when I was writing my book, it was in reaction to a number of engineers being concerned that the DevOps initiative at their company was going to make them obsolete. And so I was addressing that concern that, yes, that might happen, but these are ways to avoid that happening. And these are the paths that you can take if you're already an established engineer and your company is going down the DevOps path. This is how to stay included and not to be excluded.
Right.
And it started out being based off some real conversations that I had at different consulting engagements.
Yeah, and a little point there, right? It's like if you can't beat him, join him type of mentality.
Exactly, and kind of understand where they're going and what their needs are, and being able to fulfill those needs, so you still have a seat at the table.
All right. So how do we get started with DevOps then? Like,
Oh,
what
you
do
throw
you
that
think
right
is?
up there.
I got both of them up. I got our DevOps Overture book and the
Why is
last
my
one.
book so much fatter than your book?
Maybe because you stuffed yours with a bunch of rubber duckies. There you go. Happy.
That's better.
So what you need to know when starting a DevOps journey? Now, are there any snippets that you'd want to highlight from here, or should we jump over to giving some 10 tips already?
There's a couple. I already hit at the premise of the book, where there was a sysadmin at a consulting company or at a client of my consulting company up in Canada, that was very concerned about him being left behind because of the DevOps initiative, and he requested to go out to dinner with me to pick my brain and to understand what we were doing there at his company, and that most of that conversation made it into the book. I had an editor that trimmed a lot, but most of that made it into the book. But there's a number of similar events that happened with other people that had very similar concerns, that they were being put out of a job because they were the Jira admin and now we're going to a DevOps implementation, or they were the ClearCase admin, or they're the Linux admin, and now we don't know what's going on because the developers are now managing the operations, or vice versa, and so that sticks out. One of my favorite stories to tell was when I was a much more junior engineer. I was in charge of a software build, and this was way before Jenkins or any type of build automation. We basically had make files and shell scripts to tie everything together, and the build would take 4 or 5 hours, and it was a very manual process. You had to do step 1, 2, and then 3, and then move it over to this other system and do these other steps and everything. And I performed this build at midnight on Friday, and produced it to the testing organization on Saturday morning. The test group all came in and worked all weekend, and then the report on Monday came out that this major functionality that was supposedly in this build was not there, and so I get called into this conference room with a dozen or so executive people, and they're all why is the build bad? What's wrong with the build? And the software development team was there, like the code made it in and everything. And like going on for like half an hour before the lead software engineer wanders in, and he's like, "Why are you guys beating Sean up?" And he pulls this 5.5-inch floppy out of his jacket, and he goes, "The code's right here. I never checked it in." What? Then why did I stay late on a Friday to do this build specifically for that? And the whole, while it's a funny story, the whole thing comes down to version control. And if we had a good version control tool at that time, I would have been able to check to see, hey, are they new changes in here? And at the time we were using SCCS. And this is actually one of the reasons that company eventually adopted ClearCase. But that's a good story that's told in my book, and there's nice. A number of stories in there. But yeah, if you want to get into DevOps and get yelled at by a number of executives because you didn't do something right, this is the career path.
I would say I would say it's a valid story because I don't know that I'd have a horror story at that level, but DevOps is an interesting career, right? It's a career where you play a very critical role in creating a solution for the world, right? For consumers, customers around the world. to get data, to get the experiences that they expect, right? Today, now more than ever, right? We depend on software so much that without a good DevOps infrastructure, code isn't getting to that end customer. And we've already beat up to death the fact that it's not okay for you to schedule an appointment to go to your nearest Honda dealer for them to stick a CD in your car somewhere, right? Because it's just so inefficient.
Speaking of that, this week, twice I had a Tesla update. I don't know if you noticed that this week or not.
I never update my Tesla.
one of them, it said it's going to take 55 minutes.
Like, I only do the 2 big ones that they do a year, specifically like around the holidays, that holiday update, and like they do like 2 big ones, and those are usually the ones that wait for it.
I just accept everyone that
every
comes
single
down,
one.
But I schedule it. I don't.
You keep it up, and one day your car's not going to move.
Oh. A lot of my cars have that problem.
All right. So on the note that we kicked off, right? Because we're not just trying to sell you the book here, because Sean, your book is free.
My book is free, but if you really want to pay for it, it is on Amazon.
Yeah. But anyway, so the point of the book, right, is or both of our books was that our first tip that we want to start off with is that you want to get real world hands-on experience. And there's a number of ways to do that. So reading like my cookbook, right, is going to actually guide you. Here's how you sign up for Bitbucket. Here's how you set up your pipelines. Here's how you do all the other Atlassian/DevOps friendly tools. And here's how you walk through examples, right? And ultimately, you want to roll up your sleeves and you want to get cooking. You want to actually do something. You want to just experiment. We have this added new benefit of ChatGPT, or ChatGPT as I like to call it, that essentially is your private tutor, right? So you're not alone. Before, when Sean, I'm assuming when you were learning DevOps, even documentation wasn't probably where it is today.
Yes, there was no documentation when I grew up in the Stone Age. Yeah.
I was trying to be nice and not pull that far back.
Oh, it's okay.
You took yourself there.
No,
I'm just saying, access to the internet and documentation the way we have it today was probably not where it was back in the 80s.
It definitely wasn't. It was printed out manuals, binders and binders of printouts, and if you're lucky, you had a publication from the vendor, but often you didn't even have that. You just had something you printed off. And it was before PDFs and everything too. Yeah. So there's all these text files that you printed out. But no World Wide Web.
Definitely no World Wide Web. And I grew up with at least documentation, but you needed to know how to read in between the lines, because the documentations, they were thorough, but oftentimes you had a problem, a very specific problem. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, I don't want to read through 600 pages of a document to find that one paragraph with that one subsection that tells me, oh yeah, you forgot to click on this checkbox. Right?
Oh, wait a minute. We didn't have GUIs back then. This is all command line and yeah.
Well, we do now.
Yeah, we do now.
We're better off for it.
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly. I do see the trend going back. Atlassian's releasing a CLI for Atlassian.
That is cool. I am up on that. But one of the things we're going to recommend is infrastructure as code, and infrastructure as code is pretty much everything's going back to a file-based interface.
Well, why don't we jump? That is tip number 2. Explore infrastructure as a code. Look at Terraform. AWS has some offerings with their CloudFormation. Pulumi is a code-based IAC. Practice spinning up these VMs, right? Like, I think one of the valuable things that I learned early on was that we have virtualization where you can create these environments that don't necessarily mess up your computer, right? Like, you don't
that messes somebody else's computer up, right?
Yeah, mess up somebody else's computer, or mess up a computer you can like go back in time, because you will be learning through some trial and error.
So we're jumping all over the place here, which is cool. But our number 1 tip is create a home lab environment, and the home is in air quotes, because it doesn't necessarily have to physically be in your home. You don't need a box under your desk to do this. There's nothing wrong with doing that, because then you get to stand up something like Linux and and all the different applications that you want to play with. But it could be virtually. You could set something up in AWS, or name your favorite cloud provider, and these things would be on the lower side of the specs, so they're free. You're not going to get charged for this, and if you're concerned, you can practice with turning things on and off. So when you're not using it, it's not taking any resources up whatsoever. But you can get the minimum size server that you need to do this on AWS, and it's never going to charge money.
Or just off the an older computer, and that's
Mhm.
most of these platforms don't require a lot of resources to run.
No, you have an old laptop laying around, you can definitely do all this stuff on an old laptop.
Yeah, old little desktop, something from early 2000s, mid 2000s. You're gonna be just fine. A few gigs of RAM.
It won't cost you that much money, and if you really want to do something physical and you don't have any old hardware laying around, a $200 or $300 small footprint PC is fine. You can get them off Amazon or wherever you want to order them from.
Now, if you don't want to do the physical route, again, now tip number 2 is explore their infrastructure as a code, because a lot of companies nowadays aren't setting up their own servers. They aren't, dusting off old hardware. Did I ever tell you, Sean, how I almost set ablaze $500,000 worth of servers?
No, you have not told me that story.
Oh, this is a great story. So, one of the jobs that I got.
So Alex is confessing to the internet now. So.
No, yeah, definitely. This is a great story on what not to do as a DevOps engineer. So yeah, we went and bought a bunch of HP servers, and I learned what the word LUN meant. I always thought that the whole guy was talking about lungs, and it was a LUN.
That's a weird misinterpretation. But
learn the difference between a LUN and a lung. They're very different. But yeah, we set it all up from scratch. We wired up the whole thing to fiber, right? And it connected everything, all the Cat5, ran all the cables, did everything ourselves as a team. It's a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience. And it was awesome, and it was shiny, and it was new. And it was in a room that was climate controlled, right? Because these boxes tend to run hot. And so one day, one of my buddies sends me this is how old this is, a link message. Remember Link? Before Skype?
Yeah,
that was the old
Microsoft's
Microsoft's Link, LINQ. And so he sends me a link message, and he's like, "Hey, your room is beeping a lot." And I'm like, "Okay." So I was on a different floor and different part of the building, and so I make my way over to the room, and sure enough, it's beeping, and it's the AC unit. Now, I've never had an AC unit because I live in Southern California, and you don't need to have AC units. And so I just hit some buttons and it stopped beeping. Mission accomplished.
Solved.
I leave. And about an hour later, my buddy's like, "It's beeping again." I'm like, "All right." So I make my way back, and I hit more buttons this time. Okay. I hit even more, and it stopped. And I'm like, "Okay, it should be good." About an hour later, my team lead sends us a HipChat message, if you remember HipChat.
I loved HipChat.
Yeah, I loved HipChat too. So he sends me a HipChat message, but not to me, but to the entire team. He's like, "Hey guys, I'm in a whole different building, and all the temperature sensors in the server room are going off." And we walk in, and it's like a sauna in there. It is so incredibly hot.
Wow.
And the first thing was like, "Well, what happened to the air conditioner?" And I'm like, "I may have hit a bunch of buttons because this thing was beeping over here." I turned off the air conditioner.
So was it beeping because it was failing? Or...
It beeped because it hit the thermal threshold that the server had, and it was going to get ready to shut down. So it threw off all the warnings that high temp. So luckily nothing burned or melted. We opened up all the doors and quickly it cooled down. But yeah, that was an experience of well, this is how you light up $500,000 of servers in an hour. on fire.
That's not good. Yeah.
No. And also learn how to operate an HVAC unit is what I learned.
Yeah. So Release Team, DevOps tool specialists. We provide professional services and software reselling around the leading software DevOps tools like Atlassian, GitLab, GitHub, JFrog, and others. To talk with us about DevOps, here's our contact information. Please call 866-887-0489 or via email at info@releaseteam.com. Yeah, I'm wondering what the beeping is definitely alerting you to that it's hit the minimum temperature, the max whatever threshold. But what did it want you to do?
I don't know. I just hit buttons, Sean. I don't do that. This has to make it onto a tip. Read the errors. Read everything that's
read the errors. Do not report X is not working. That's not a valid issue or work item or ticket to report.
But when you're learning, it's critical to read everything, because when you're learning, when you're getting started for the first time, these things are going to come at you with so many different errors. Logs are going to be just your best friend, and just so many data points and so many signals. And it's easy to kind of skim. It's easy to ignore the devils in the details on these things. And that would be one of my personal tips as when you get started with DevOps, is like, don't just glance over things. Like really look at the errors or the logs or whatever the screen is showing you, because there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of time savers. Something can take you hours, and it could take you hours because you didn't read correctly. Like, don't add words. I do a great job at always adding words to what I'm reading.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem I have when I'm taking exams. It's like I start adding things to the question that aren't really there. And that's
glad I'm not the only one. So that'll be like tip. Let's go with tip number 2.5.
Okay.
Another tip is, and this is kind of a newer trend. I think I started seeing this towards the tail end of the 2019s or of the 20 teens, if you will. Around 2018, 2019, I started seeing this term DevSecOps. And this one was an interesting one to me, because DevOps meant one thing, but DevSecOps kind of threw in a whole lot of other stuff in there.
Well, yeah. So this is also another loaded topic that you just jumped into.
Giving tips. I'm just giving tips.
So yeah, DevSecOps means including security. However, DevOps didn't exclude security, but people that sell security products felt it did, so they invented the term DevSecOps. And unfortunately, it stuck. And then you had other disciplines that also felt that they were left out of DevOps. So you have Dev Test Ops, and a few others. I can't think of ones right now, but it got out of hand. DevSecOps is pretty much the only one that's still around. But I would argue that DevOps always included security, and you don't need to put the sec into DevSecOps to imply that you're security conscious. Yeah. But it is a good tip. You should have some understanding of what the different security plays are in DevOps.
Yeah, I would say at least the basics of Security Plus would be helpful, right? Because
the basics, just the basics.
Yeah, just the basics.
It doesn't.
Right, but you want to know, you want to understand that there is a correlation between code, which is what your pipelines and your DevOps is deploying and pushing out, and then vulnerabilities and basically hackers, right? Like, there is a direct correlation. Like, systems don't get hacked because somebody left the front door open to an office building, right? Like, that's how they got in. But there's networks and there's software involved that gets exploited and taken advantage of.
Yeah, and very often it's not necessarily something you wrote, but it's something that you included. Yeah. So if you're using some sort of library that you found in a repository online, like MPH or npm or whatever, or Ruby, or there's all sorts of them. And if you pull that down and you don't know what its security rating is, you could be opening yourself up to some major.
Yeah, that, or there's a lot of tools like you mentioned, right? Security was never not an aspect of DevOps, but you might have glanced over these details, right? There's SonarQube and Veracode that do all the analysis for you, but you might be seeing a bunch of warnings. And you're like, oh,
yeah, they're just warnings. Until they're errors, do I need to do anything about it? Or the worst is we've been getting these same set of warnings for the last 3 years. So it's the norm. We don't need to do anything about it. Like, well, no, you really should investigate those warnings.
Yeah. There's bonus tip number 2, which is warnings are just errors hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
They will get you. They will catch up to you at some point.
Often, if you're troubleshooting an actual error in a log file, the details are in the warnings. And if you ignore all the warnings and just focus on that error message, you may be missing the root cause, or it may take you 14 hours to find the root cause when it was right there in the warning message.
Yeah, but perfect transition to our next tip, which is learn monitoring and logging tools. I think you and I grew up, Sean, with you read through all the logs. You read
there was no tool for you.
Yeah, but today
maybe grep was your tool,
But today the landscape's a little bit different. Right? We have tools like Datadog that help us out with stuff. Splunk's got some stuff, New Relic. So get good at learning how to use the tools, because again, there's always hidden meanings and hidden valuable information in those warnings and errors that these monitoring and logging tools give you a lot of insight, right? They'll give you insight to problems, but also to intrusions, right? There's things in the cybersecurity world where, sorry?
They'll be able to find the patterns for you that you might not be able to see.
Yeah.
Scrolling through these log files. And intrusions is a very good example of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Snort, I think, is the one I'm familiar with, where it just all it does is read your network traffic, and if it finds an anomaly, maybe an IP address that doesn't belong, like it'll notify you, right? But again, gone are the days where you had to fire up Wireshark, read through entire network packet stacks, right? Yeah. And traces it and like figure out where the intrusions were. Now we have tools that do it for us, but that doesn't mean that you need to learn and be skilled on how to read those things.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to still pick up something like a Wireshark, because once these monitoring tools alert you on something, you still need to go down, roll up your sleeves, and go, figure out what you need to do. But a lot of these monitoring tools, they recognize the patterns. They've seen so many log files that even if you're not getting error messages, they may alert you to a performance problem. You might say, "Oh, my pick on GitLab again. My GitLab server grinds to a halt at 7 a.m. every day, and we don't know why. It never produces an error, but your logging tool, if it's aimed at the GitLab server, might be able to tell you that you're losing memory resources at this particular time because a virus scanner is running, or a backup tool kicks off at that time, or someone's saving the last season of some TV show up on your server. And you'd never find that just digging through your GitLab log files.
Right. Yeah. You'll find a lot of interesting stuff when you go look at the logs.
So what's the next tip?
The next tip is understand containers and Kubernetes. I know that Kubernetes is a hot buzzword, and Docker, it's hard to be in the DevOps space without having heard either both Docker or Kubernetes. So get started with both.
And if you've built your home server or your home workspace, like our tip number 1, this is a great place to start practicing with different container tools. Definitely Docker is the number 1 to start playing with. But once you have many Docker images on your home lab, that's when you start doing things with Kubernetes. Because until you have multiple containers, Kubernetes doesn't really make sense. But it makes a lot of sense when you have to orchestrate, dozens to hundreds of servers. It's the whole pet versus cattle. Have you heard of that one? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you
But it
haven't?
makes sense.
Okay. So when you have a server, you treat it as a pet. You give it a name. You know its behaviors very well. You know its parameters. When you start having dozens to hundreds of servers, you no longer treat them as pets. You treat them as cattle,
Ah.
and that's when Kubernetes comes in because
I always thought it was when you stop naming things.
yeah, well, that's the tell of when you're now graduated up to having a server farm and the whole farm concept of all that. So at that point, you can't name all the servers anymore, and your servers start having generic names with or generic letters and numbers to identify what servers what. And so at that point, you're treating them like cattle. So therefore, you need something like Kubernetes to maintain all of them. And there's alternatives to Kubernetes as well, but that seems to be the one that has won the arms race for now.
All right. And I think Kubernetes and Docker, in my opinion, they start getting more technical. I think when you look at some of our tips that we've given you so far, I think it's pretty generic, but you're now getting into very specific tools, right? Like we're
Yeah.
we're getting into technical documentation, technical details, and I think that Kubernetes and Docker's route is where like DevOps starts to become a little bit more real for you.
Yeah.
All right.
And Docker is definitely probably the one to jump on in the containerization realm. But there's others as well. You could play with Vagrant or VirtualBox. There's
Is
quite a few.
VirtualBox still around?
It's still around.
I
You can
remember
still play with it.
VirtualBox.
Yeah.
I used to love
So
VirtualBox.
Oracle is the one that's still keeping that around.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so play with the one. But if you're trying to spurn this into a career, Docker is probably the one to go with. But then after that, if you don't want to dive directly into Kubernetes, look at Rancher or Helm or one of those other ones. Terraform is a good one. Doesn't do the same thing as Kubernetes, but it definitely helps you stand up containers and configure them.
And I'll tell you again, just as another little pro tip here, so pro tip number 3, if any of these words aren't making sense to you, again, go to your nearest ChatGPT or Gemini model and go, what is Terraform? And be curious with your AI agents or AI tools here, because again, you used to have to go to vendor websites, find their documentation, which is not always easy to find. Go beyond their getting started, interpret and digest, and like it's just so technically heavy that with ChatGPT, you just simply ask it like, what is Terraform? What are examples of Terraform? How would I use Terraform? What are bad things that I should know? What are good things?
Why is Terraform?
Why is? So again, we live in a very interesting world where if you don't want to get started or learn a new technology or a new career, then it's really on you at this point, because there's an infinite number of tools and methods to get started.
And software engineering in general, well, way before DevOps, it was always a constant learning. There was never a, hey, I know this tool, I can sit back and just manage this tool for X number of, for the rest of my career, or hey, I'm a good C++ programmer, I will never have to program anything again outside of C++.
Right.
If you're developing your career, you're always going to be learning. There's no slowdown, and it's only accelerated. And with the advancement of AI, it's just going to continue to accelerate. AI will help us stay, relevant or help us learn, but it doesn't take away the fact that you're going to be learning 2 or 3 new technologies every year.
And Sean, I started reading this article yesterday, but I didn't quite read it all the way through. But the premise of it was a lot of companies today are foregoing hiring entry-level software engineers because a lot of those basic tasks that you need an entry-level software engineer to do are being done by AI, right?
I think I've read the same damn article.
Well, then hopefully you know the end for it, because I was kind of curious, right?
Um,
But the thought was, well, AI
trying to
isn't going
remember
to.
who posted it. I'm pretty sure it was on LinkedIn, but now.
I, I think it showed up on my Google articles that when I swiped to the left on the Google homepage,
Yeah.
on my phone at least. But anyways, so the idea was, because these low-hanging type of tasks, nuances really, can be done really well by AI, you're really left with harder design solution type of programming, right? Like programming that hasn't been invented yet per se, because if it's already exists, then
So
some
AI is great
LLM,
at finding what already exists, but it's not good at creating what doesn't exist.
right? So so what we're left with is, then okay, so if I just graduated from college with a degree in engineering, then what do I do? Like, what kind of hope do I have? And the article was pointing out, like, you need to learn how to leverage the AI tools to get you to that senior level as quickly as humanly possible. Because if you're depending, right, if you're depending to come fresh out of college and basically do the basic tasks, then you're going to be in for a very rude awakening.
Yeah, I remember reading this now. I wish I could remember the author. I'm just not great at
There's
names.
too many articles that I read it.
Yeah, but I believe if it's the same article, he points out, or they point out, the fact that without having that entry level position anymore, we won't have senior developers anymore because there's no path. That no one's being put in at the junior level to become senior. So what will end up happening, which has happened in other not industries, but other types of software, so like our COBOL friends, our mainframe friends, there's no junior mainframe people out there. there's only senior.
You just wake up knowing COBOL.
Yeah, there's very few junior people. And I don't recommend anybody go into that
profession.
That profession. No, it's the onus is on the companies that still use that technology. They don't need.
Hey man, it saved Southwest when the whole outage that last year happened.
But that wasn't mainframe stuff. That was just Windows 95 or whatever.
I know, the fact that they were still on an older version.
that was technical debt actually saved the day for once, instead of causing the problems. Which that's a whole nother episode about technical debt. But yeah, I would, the whole point, I think, or one of the conclusions is, how are we going to get senior engineers after the current senior engineers have moved on? The natural progression of a software engineer's career is to eventually get into management, where you end up hating the job and then eventually retiring. But you don't really see a lot of older software engineers that are actually writing code. They get promoted up to project lead or team lead, and then to a manager, and then to director, and and so on. And the further you go up that chain, the less actual hands-on coding you typically do.
Yeah.
And I'm being very general with that. So how do we produce new engineers for this progression if AI just took out the bottom rung of the ladder?
I think my 2 cents is, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, my 2 cents is that you have to be learning and building with AI, so that when you come into the job force, you have this experience already, because you're just going to be effective. Because AI is still kind of useless without a conductor, or in your case, an overture.
Overture. I don't know if you call the conductor that does the overture the overturer.
What do you call the conductor that does the overture?
I think it's still the conductor.
Just the conductor?
I don't think they swap out the conductor during the practice versus the actual concert.
Well, you know me, just making up words.
Yeah. pronouncing
again,
acronyms.
I think that learning curve, I think that expectation in companies is going to shift, where I think before there was a little bit more of a wiggle room honeymoon period where, oh, just come and learn our stack. AI is going to make it so that within a one day, you know the company's entire stack, or you know what you need to know, and then you know how to find the rest of the answers later, right? Atlassian's doing this with their teamwork graph, where onboarding to a company, right? You just ask, what is Project Gemini? And you won't have to go read through documentation. You'll get a summary view of like, here's what Project Gemini is.
Yeah.
Like, right? You'll be able to ask the who, what, when, where, why of any topic for any company quickly. And again, not get just results where you got to go read and analyze and digest, but the results that come back to you are already analyzed and digested, and you just comprehend at that point.
Yeah.
And so it's going to change. The game's changing.
It definitely will. And to your point, you should know as much as possible in the AI realm coming into, if you're a new college grad, or even if you're jumping between one company and another, having these skills in your tool belt is very valuable. Yeah. So what's our next?
Our next tip is one that you're gonna like. Learn version control. We've already talked about it a couple of times, but learn it, master it. One of the biggest fears that I usually have in the DevOps space is not knowing how to, not necessarily branch. I think I can branch okay, but putting things back in,
merging
the whole rebase thing, right?
Yeah.
The squash. I was like, there's so many ways to mess things up in version control.
Definitely these days, Git is the one to learn, and it's free. You don't necessarily need to use GitLab or GitHub or anything. If you're just learning, Git. Kraken is a good GUI on top of Git to use. And I could see half of your T-shirt, and I wasn't sure if it was the Git Kraken one or not. But
Git Kraken,
definitely cool. Yeah. I've got a non-software development shirt on today, so I don't know.
A duck?
Yeah, a duck. Yeah, an alcoholic duck. Yeah. So it's actually a Disney-related T-shirt too. So.
But I would say if you're going to get started with DevOps in any way, shape, or form, that's usually where I would start, right? It's the version control impacts, because regardless of whether you do pipelines, regardless of whether you do security, regardless of whether you do virtualization, right? Saving code on your computer locally and, pulling out that 5.5-inch floppy disk is not, you can't do that in 2025. Like it's impossible, right? Like just having code on your computer, you need a version control system. Like unless you're building something by yourself in your own basement that's only touched by you, then you're always gonna have to work in a team. And the moment you have to collaborate, you can't be emailing files back and forth.
No. And the knowing the basics of the version control tool is key to working in a software team. And these days it's Git. So knowing the basics of Git, knowing how to add files to your repo, what a repo is, how the repo storage works. As long as you read that once, unless you're the person that's managing the version control tool, you just have a basic understanding of that. You don't need to worry about answering that in an interview or a test or anything. But the basic commands, add, creating a branch, merging that branch back in, which is Alex's fear.
Well, I'm not fearful of the merge.
Committing. Yeah,
I'm fearful of the rest of it that comes with the merging. Because like fast forwarding, like catching a branch up, I was like, what in the world? Like, how are we like visually? It is hard to visualize. Which again, right here.
So a lot of the things that you talked about, squashing and fast forwarding, and what was the other one that you mentioned already? The rebase. A lot of that came from earlier version control tools that it probably made a little bit more sense to visualize that. But ultimately, it's just remapping the tree. Oh, we got
This is my favorite. It's learning git branching.js.org. You walk through the examples and it gives you a demo, but then eventually you come over here and you start creating, like you start typing in the commands, but you
Uh-huh.
visually see like what happens when you do
See
like
what
a
it's
git.
doing. Yeah.
Like when you do a git branch, you'll start seeing like a branch pop
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And so this is great to learn how this works in a
Yeah.
very visual way, because in the command line, you don't always see it.
No, it's very hard to visualize at first from the command line what's going on.
Yeah, so if you do a git commit, you can see a dot pop up.
Mm-hmm.
If you do a git branch, you can see that it's not correct.
Yeah, you need to give it a name. Yeah.
Main. That's not right either.
What did you? I can't see what you're
I'm
typing.
already in, so.
Oh, you can't create main. Main already exists.
Main 2.
Yeah. If you want to switch to a branch, it's checkout. So it's like git co and then the branch name.
There we go. And then learning what the little star does, right? The star is very critical in Git. It's kind of hard to see, but this is a great way where you can very easily visualize what the code or what the commands are doing. And you have your rebase, your checkouts, your merges, and stuff like that. So I love this tool. And there's actually exercise, like if you actually read through it, it tells you what to do. Like, so you can actually get proficient in this.
Yeah.
So we'll link it in the episode description here.
Sure. Yeah, and there's tons of resources on how to learn Git. And
there's a book on Git.
There's many books on Git. Yeah.
Well, there's like the book, like the Git-SCM download from the official Git website. Yeah, the official Git website has the book. Yeah. So if you go to Git-SCM, there's a pro Git here that you can just read through it and you learn everything you need to know about Git.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of tutorials. There's a lot of, walkthroughs similar to the one Alex was just showing. Yep. So there's no limit to the amount of free resources to learn Git. So there's really no excuse for not having a working knowledge of Git before going into trying to get a new position.
Yep. Because we gotta hurry it up. We still got like 4 more tips to go here.
Oh, I'll edit like 30 minutes out of the video.
The next one is get hands-on with the actual CI/CD tool. So Jenkins, TeamCity, the one I used growing up, but now we have like GitHub Actions, GitLab's got their own thing, Bitbucket's got their pipelines. You want to practice deploying code because that's also a very hard, tricky thing to do. And it's really hard to emulate as well sometimes, right? And this is where you now start blurring the lines of potentially paying for money. So get used to doing things locally so you can just get used to it.
Yeah. So if you can download Jenkins or Hudson still and do it for free locally. And if you have your own little home lab. And that's what I'd recommend. And there's also not as many resources out there as there is with Git, but there is plenty of resources to learn Jenkins. Hudson is basically Jenkins before the acquisition. And but either one will get you. So the goal is to just learn an orchestration system. And we call it CI/CD, but ultimately it's just orchestrating a number of tasks that need to happen from the beginning of your compile to when you actually have an end product to deploy or deliver somewhere. And I would say Jenkins is still a very good first one to learn. It's probably it's still the industry leader out there. But it's on its decline. A lot of companies are moving away from Jenkins, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be one key winner. If you're using a particular enterprise version control, like we mentioned GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, then it's normal for your organization to also use its built-in CI/CD tool. If you're not using one of those, which I'm not sure what else you'd be using at this point, there's
5.5-inch floppies.
Yeah, there's plenty of other CI tool vendors out there. Majority of them are going to be paid. and they're also, the majority of them, going to be SaaS based, meaning a cloud based tool. So, but things like BuildKite is an honorable mention. I'm a big fan of that. It doesn't have a whole lot of market share. From the Reddit pages, you would think it had a lot, but you don't see it in enterprise companies as often as I think you should. But those are all honorable mentions of things to pick up for understanding what a CI tool is. And at this point, focus on the CI. If you really want to dive deep into the CD portion of it, that's fine. But you're going to also be leveraging what you learned as infrastructure as code and your Kubernetes and your Docker and things like that. But if you just want to compile your code, which we haven't talked about that, I think that's coming up. You want to focus on the build, compile, linking portions of your CI tool.
Yep. Next up, we got the last 3. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're still with us 50 minutes into this. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because we are aggressively trying to grow this channel. All right. Next one is understand the cloud platforms. And we've talked about infrastructure as a service a little bit, but this is a little bit deeper, or I guess, no, broad. I would say broad. Right. And so we're talking your GCPs, your Azures, your AWS, Oz.
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 You didn't pronounce GCP.
Yeah, your GUP, your GitHub, your GKIP, GCUP.
Oh, let's stop at that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the cool thing is that almost all of these, if not all of these, are free, at least free to get started. Microsoft gives you a ton of free resources. If you're a student, you get even more resources. AWS gives you like a boatload of get started for free resources. They typically last like a year, so you don't want to sit on this for too long.
Yeah. But also, if you're not asking for gigantic servers, you're often at the free level. You can spin up multiple microservices or microservers and never hit that threshold where AWS is going to start charging you. It's not until you have them up for a long amount of time and using a lot of either storage is the big place they get you, or a lot of CPU, that you won't hit the threshold that it'll start charging you.
Yeah. But get familiar with EC2s, S3s, IAMs, right? Get familiar with the Google Compute Engine. Just get familiar with it all because every company uses them nowadays. It's kind of hard to work in a modern day company that's not using AWS or at least GCP, or if you're crazy and you're using Azure, you can use that too.
We have customers that are using Azure. So
I find those to be a little bit more rare. We used to be. Did I tell you the story about the one of the companies that I worked at was on AWS and we had to get off of that quickly?
Oh, was that the Wally Mart?
Yeah. One of our investors find out that we were using AWS, and then Walmart was like, "Wait, we're one of your customers. We don't want our data in AWS." So we had to quickly convert everything to GCP. But learn those, and then we're gonna get down here to the last 2. But again, remind you to hit that subscribe button so you make Sean happy. These 2 are my favorite, Sean. These 2 are the ones that I think are the basis, at least of my origin, where I came from.
Okay.
But learn a programming language, right? I started off in C++. There's Java, but C++ and Java, 2 languages that I just mentioned, are very drastically different than the programming I did when I was in DevOps. In DevOps, I did things more with Python and Perl and PHP.
Yeah, primarily the scripting languages.
Yeah, the scripting languages, which in my opinion are a little bit more forgiving than your C++.
Oh, definitely. And I think they're more fun.
They definitely are more fun. So yeah, Bash and PowerShell, like all those kind of things, even though they're not technically languages, like you should learn how all that stuff works and operates. We'll leave terminal for the last final point. But yeah, learning how to code to a certain degree, right? I'm not telling you gotta how to do whole front end, back end development, but scripting languages is very key because in DevOps, you'll be automating a lot of stuff, and you typically automate through a scripting language.
Yeah. Yeah, even if you have an orchestration tool like we're talking about with Jenkins, you're typically dropping down to a command line or calling out to a command line, and you need to know that snippet of code to execute whatever you're trying to do.
Yep, and then the final tip, and this is more of a.
I've already forgot what the final one was. So
I'll call this. I think this last tip is more of a lifestyle than a tip, right? But when you're in the DevOps world, there's different camps to be there, specifically when it comes to your operating system. There's a Windows world, there's a Mac OS world.
Yeah.
But if you're in the DevOps world, you are most likely going to be operating out of the Linux world. And so learning Linux, learning networking in general, those are two very, very important things that we're combining them here as one tip, but you should definitely at a minimum learn how Linux works, find a flavor that you like, a distro, then a flavor within the distro.
Well, yeah, once you're, if you're just starting out in your career, you should look at all the different operating systems that corporations are using and determine which one you want to base your career off of. You can be a jack of all trades and learn all of them. And in fact, that's the path that I took. But back then it was like multiple versions of Unix and Windows 3 was the first one I saw in a corporate environment. But pick which one. And and it should be Linux, but once you decide, hey, this is where I want to tie my career path to, pick the distribution that you think is one that you like, but also that is relevant in the industry, which that's pretty much Ubuntu and Red Hat still.
Yeah, RHEL.
RHEL. You don't see many of the other distributions in a corporate environment.
I know. We lost CentOS.
Maybe CentOS is kind of, it still exists, but yeah, it's not really an option anymore.
And then I learned at our Scale conference that it wasn't Suzy, it's SUSE.
Oh yeah, you didn't.
The Gecko one.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that distribution. However, you don't see it in corporations that often. It's not like it's never there, but it's not the RHEL is the prominent one.
Yeah, RHEL is what I learned. RHEL was really it. And in the world of Linux, there really are two distinct, right? I think I remember clearly. RHEL is one path. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is one path of style, and then Ubuntu is the other style. So they're not interchangeable 100% either. Like commands are slightly different, right? One does the way you get packages.
Yeah. Oh, that part is very different. But once you get past packages and you're just using the operating system, they're very, very close. And in fact, a lot of times the difference is in the shell that you use. So you can be on Red Hat and pick a different shell from everybody else, and your command line is completely different than anybody else's. But we're probably getting too deep.
Yeah, but the world does run. So learn Linux. So basically, if you're getting started with DevOps and you're like, I'm a Microsoftie for life, you're gonna have a pretty harsh reality here. You got to pick up a Linux.
These were definitely 10 good tips. I'm not sure they were in a logical order. But
this was number one.
Yeah. But I think they're all together a great tips, because they all melt into each other. So if you're going to build a home lab, which was tip number 1, you really need to know an operating system first, which was tip number 10.
Yeah. And to close things out, Sean, I want to remind people of the Super Mario effect.
Okay.
Which is, have you seen the Super Mario effect from Mark Rober?
No.
So there's this concept that this stuff, everything we're talking about here within DevOps, it's not for the faint of heart, because if it was, then anybody and everybody would do it, right? Like it takes a certain level of consistency and dedication and overall curiosity to play with all these things that we talked about, to get curious with all the tools, and to eventually build a pretty high-paying career. Which, let us know in the comments if you'd like for us to do an episode on DevOps salaries, right? I think that'd be kind of cool to explore what different positions and levels of experience get you from a salary perspective. But anyways, going back to the Super Mario effect, this is not easy. This is gonna take you. It's not something you're gonna pick up on a weekend, right? You're not. You might be able to learn how to branch
You'll
on a
start
weekend.
on a weekend,
Yeah,
but it's
you're
going
gonna
to
learn.
be
Yeah,
yeah.
you can get started on a weekend, but you're not gonna master this in a weekend, right?
No.
And so get ready for the long haul. And the Super Mario effect is you are gonna hit a lot of roadblocks and challenges, right? Things are not gonna work. That Docker container, you're gonna follow those instructions to the T, and some environment variable that wasn't mentioned in the document is gonna screw you all over.
Sure.
And then
Yeah.
it's gonna be hours of Googling and hours of figuring out why in the world is this not working when it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and especially when you're doing everything correctly, but it's some hidden thing that some technical writer forgot to include in the documentation that's going to come and bite you right in the butt. And so the Super Mario effect is when you're Mario and you're trying to save Princess Peach from Bowser, you don't give up the first time you fall into the hole. You go back, you regroup, and you go, okay, I got to jump a little later. I got to jump a little earlier. I got to get this item, right? You strategize and you think about, I don't try the same thing over and over and over and expect different results. You adapt, you get the feedback, and you try different things, but you never give up. You always proceed, and the perseverance gets you to eventually save Peach. And so again, this is kind of the premise of the Super Mario effect coming into this stuff is it's gonna be hard, and there's gonna be a lot of piranhas, there's gonna be a lot of doors and holes, and you
Turtles,
can't give up. You have to keep trying at this because it's worth it. Sean, you and I have both built careers out of it. We both have written books on it, and
we definitely need more people in this field. There's
yeah.
no shortage of there's no glut of DevOps engineers looking for jobs yet.
And I still think that ChatGPT is kind of hard to replace all of this too, or AI in general, right? Because there's still a lot of human cognitive intelligence you need for
AI
this.
has its place, and it's mainly there to enhance the people that are in there doing work.
Yeah.
So it augments, not.
You're not. Yeah. You don't want your toaster to automatically one day just like start whipping out like Swiss Army knives out of it.
Well, no, I hope toasters don't do that. But
well, you don't want AI pushing code to your toaster on
if a
having a
toaster started randomly making me Pop-Tarts, I wouldn't complain.
With that said, folks, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Again, we're trying to grow our channel. So if you're watching this, you got some value, subscribe, hit that like, comment down below. Those help out. Those are signals that YouTube likes to see. And then also don't forget to share this with your coworkers, your boss, your teammates, everybody. If you don't like somebody, if you like somebody, send it to them.
All righty. Well, until next week, everyone.
Bye, everyone.